Good evening and welcome to Generation Movie on a Monday night in February, where we're knee deep in the Oscar decade cavalcade. My name is J.W. Colwell. I'm joined as always by my good friend, my co-host, my partner in cinema, and my partner in crime, but don't tell anybody. Rich Drees. Rich Drees, how you doing tonight, buddy?
I am doing great.
That was
crazy
lengthy.
weekend. Crazy weekend. Busy weekend,
stuff,
but
a lot of stuff going on.
yeah.
You got your swag. You'll have to wait till next week to see my swag because it is in the car. So I just didn't bring it in, but I will show you what we got for going to see it opening night, which is a pretty
nice.
fine. It's a heavy metal keychain. Yeah, it's a heavy metal keychain, so super nice. I'm happy about it. And then you got the Red Hulk and you got the cool helmet. I got
Red
the full
thing here.
Nice. I got the full shield, and I thought it was going to be plastic, but it's not plastic, Rich, and you'll see it next week. It's full metal. It's heavy.
Nice. I mean, they also had like a regular conical bucket as well.
Yeah, nobody wants that shit. Everybody wants cool stuff. I like AMC seems to have like the best. I'm very much looking forward to Superman stuff and Fantastic Four stuff.
Dude, I'm gonna be ridiculous with that.
It's gonna be crazy.
I should be. Shame on me for being spendy like that, but yeah, it's gonna happen.
Yeah, it's okay. It needs to happen. And I think popcorn buckets are my new thing. I don't know. It's just weird. I really like them, and I think they're cool looking, and they're great for displays, and they do have a functional use. Like they can hold stuff, which is nice.
I gotta start adding shelves in this apartment. My landlord's not gonna be really happy if I start banging more holes into the wall. So,
well, let's talk about box office this weekend. Let's also talk because you and we were gonna try to do a review, but my Friday conflicted, and then the weekend was really busy. Let's talk about Brave New World a little bit. Couple things. I don't know what people are expecting. I'm gonna turn down something. Let's see if we can get it to not do that. Okay. I don't know what people are expecting. I think the interesting thing here is when Ant-Man went out of its realm to do stuff, it made a bad Ant-Man movie. And when we're making Brave New World, I think staying in the lane is the right way to go. Make it a political thriller. Mm-hmm. That's the genre that this particular franchise within the MCU works on a level. I didn't find it boring. But I'm one of the people that loves Winter Soldier, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I wore a vintage Winter Soldier shirt to the theater. So I dug it out of mothballs. I've had it for a long time. Anyway, so I didn't hate the movie. I think Mackey's trying really hard. I think the key to the movie for me is Ford. Mainly because he's at this point in his career, he's good at everything. And he's just enjoying himself. Which for me, as a lifelong Harrison Ford fan, it's cool. He's great in Shrinking. He's great in the Yellowstone spinoff, and he's great here. Even knowing what's going on. I understand people are a little frustrated that it's not a sequel to like a Captain America movie. That it's more of a de facto sequel to the Incredible Hulk and to a certain extent Externals. But weren't they the same Eternals?
Welcome to an interconnected franchise. Okay, that's always going to be kind of what's going to be happening.
Well, what I was going to say about that is those are the same fucking people complaining about Eternals not appearing, right? are the same people going, well, now they're doing Eternals?
Well, I mean, if you kind of look at the MCU timeline, they're complaining about, well, how come this show or that thing didn't mention what was going on with the Celestial and the Indian Ocean? And you're like, oh, well, this takes place before those other shows, even though this is released later. So first of all, and this should have been out a year ago anyways.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch, this is not the first time I've said this, but between COVID, Bob Chapek, Jonathan Majors, Chadwick Boseman passing away tragically,
they've had some
and 100 other things. The story, the behind the scenes book telling the story of Marvel, of the MCU's Phase 4, 5, and 6 films is going to be some of the juiciest reading possible, because it's just, everything has been just such unfortunate chaos behind a lot of what's going on. And so I think some people are, because of that, are sharpening their knives for Captain America 4 here. And yes, I think the movie does have a couple of problems. Doesn't quite work in a few places, and very much shows some of the scenes where they did some reshoots. But I still think it's not the worst MCU product. Okay, I'm looking at you, Thor 2. But
Dark World is still pretty bad.
Dark World's
but I think the interesting thing here for me is, do I recommend it as an MCU movie? Yeah, it's not a cure-all for cancer. That's coming in July, right? That's coming in July. The big shoe to drop in 2025 is that. Is it like, I'll give you another thing. As I was watching the trailer for it, Thunderbolts looks like it's going to be fun. And the interesting thing here is, and this is a big problem with this movie, in my opinion, is we like Anthony Mackie as Captain America and Sam. We like him, but he's only always been packaged with other more dynamic characters. So he's packaged with, in the Captain America movies, he's packaged with Captain America, and then he's packaged with Bucky, who we really love. When you watch the Thunderbolts trailer, there are 3 characters in the Thunderbolts trailer. You go, I love those characters. I want to see what happens to them. And one of them is one of the biggest female stars on the planet in Florence Pugh. And so guess what? There's a little bit more buzz there. Also, Sebastian Stan is having a good run right now. And we care about Bucky a lot. So is there more buzz for that movie? Sure. But here's the thing. This movie's still fun. And don't tell me the last 15 or so minutes with this guy isn't amazing. Don't tell me that some of the stuff, like the dog fights, are pretty good. But I get it. I understand. You're a little bored with whatever. But don't put it all on Anthony Mackie. This movie got bounced around a lot, and I think when you watch it on a second viewing, or maybe you kind of chew on it a little bit, it's not going to be nearly as bad as the critics have made it out to be. And I also don't think, and I'm a Marvel shill here, but I just feel like there are other worse movies you could be spending your money on. So
well, let's look at it too. This was like one of the last films that was basically being done under the Bob Chapek regime initially.
He was disastrous. A disaster.
Yeah, so I think possibly we can look for, a really good, strong upswing, with Thunderbolts, and especially with Fantastic Four. I think Fantastic Four is the one that, they're really pouring everything into right now. I think they're feeling good about Thunderbolts. Maybe they're even really positive about it. We'll see. I read a story here today. I read a story in Variety, and all these other, all the Hollywood stuff, and they were like, these MCU movies and the superhero genres is in a downward spiral, and nothing's going to bring them back. And
this movie grossed $87.8 million. It's going to gross another 13 or so today for a 100 million 4-day weekend, 192 million worldwide. And I am consistently amazed, Rich, when we talk about a $500 million movie being a financial disappointment. And I understand because they cost a lot of money to make. But this one is almost 70 million less than anything that was made than the Marvels. It's 70 million less than Ant-Man Quantumania. It's 70 million. So even with all the reshoots, it's only 180 million dollars. So it's already 12 million over its budget, and then probably another 140 or so for marketing. I just don't understand. I don't understand it, and I also don't understand the concept that we're gonna fight about it and be like, is it the best Marvel movie? No. Is it the worst? No. Also no.
It's mid-tier, lower mid-tier, in the lower third of the mid-tier films.
And the key for me is if you go in with something, right? I am a Harrison Ford fan. So Harrison Ford in the MCU is a big deal to me. And guess what? He's pretty great in the movie. Like he's all over the place as a character, but right now Ford can do all of those things. So I'm all for it. Let's get some comments because I know people on the network don't like the movie. So let's see. Good evening, friends from Snowed In, Canada. Be safe. Be safe in Canada. Snowed in.
Hope you're
warm. Good evening, gentlemen.
Fair bed set up for us in Canada because I think we're all heading there soon.
Let's call it what it was. The Falcon. Fine. Again, but Mackey's good. I think Mackey's good.
He was given the mantle by Steve, and granted, there's a moment in the movie where he has that self-doubt beat, which I think we pretty much kind of covered with the Falcon and Winter Soldier series. So I don't think we really needed that moment. It felt like they kind of wedged that emotional beat back in there for some other things that happened in that scene. And I don't want to get into spoilers, so I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah, we're not going to do a lot of spoilers.
But yeah, no, he's Cap right now.
We're expecting a full-powered Sabra and not kill our Dennis Dunphy, aka Demolition Man. Oh. That is a spoiler. But what I'm going to say to you, Have Cheetah Move You, is Sabra as a character right now is political minefield. Yeah, it's a political minefield. Joe writes, found it boring. The couple of fun action parts couldn't recover it. I didn't. I was engaged. Again, though, I'm a Harrison Ford guy. I like the Serpent Squad as heavies because we yet see Stingray. Sure, Serpent Squad's great, but again, if you're practically going by the way things have gone since The Dark Knight, the Serpent Squad was never going to be the Serpent Squad. It was never going to be, since The Dark Knight, we haven't had anything that where things are, a guy running around dressed like a snake, and that got cut. So, who has the echo? I think it's Rich.
We got it fixed. I think
we got it fixed.
Yeah.
Anthony Mackie looks great as Captain America. He does, and he fits the role. I like Mackie better in Twisted Metal. Okay, but Twisted Metal is a totally different beast. Echo is gone. Thanks, Ken. Would have preferred if he didn't have jetpack wings. I don't know. I think it makes his Captain America unique. Plus, I think where his Captain America, for me, it works as a hero. I like him. I like him as the I can do this all day kind of Cap, where he doesn't have a super serum, so he needs as many gimmicks and gadgets and gizmos galore that he can use. I don't mind that we have Wakandan wings. I don't mind that we have cool shit. And I would expect Captain America to have cool shit. But I just think if you go in with the idea that this is the first of 3 Marvel movies, and I think for most people going in, the Marvel movies are going to get decidedly better as we go through the year, would be my guess. But I also heard somebody say, like, completely crazy things like nobody liked the Falcon and Winter Soldier show. Nobody liked Loki. Like, I've heard all kinds of weird shit where it's like, this is not the time to, we had a rough era with Bob Chapek. He ruined a lot of shit. He's very much the Zaslav of Disney. So,
and it's taken a while to shake off all of
the bumps. The bumps, he said. The bump, right. His influence.
Yeah, the same way it's taken the town a couple of years to fully recover from the strikes, a couple of years to fully recover from COVID. Movies are big, giant, ocean-going cruise ships that you just can't turn on a dime. So
right, and I think you're bringing up the bumps in the road, the major bumps, Major's getting arrested. Mm-hmm. Chadwick Boseman passing away, because there wouldn't have been any question about Black Panther 2 if Chadwick Boseman were alive. We wouldn't have had any talk about that, right? I mean,
actually, it looks to me like they were positioning Boseman and Black Panther to be kind of like the leader of the Avengers, the spine of this, this arc.
The new team.
That unfortunately that was like one of the things they had to scramble and reconfigure. Sadly,
Thunderbolts has the one that left me cold. It looks really bad. I don't think it does. I think it looks irreverent and maybe not what you may want, but I don't think anything Florence Pugh is in the last 2 years, everything she's been in, it's like Anna Taylor-Joy. Everything she's been in is moderately good. So, and it's usually because of her. So, I don't know. That's the one that I think people are looking at going, that one could surprise. Fantastic Four is a no-brainer, though. If they hit the Fantastic Four out of the park, nobody will be going, oh my God, Captain America only grossed $600 million worldwide at the box office. Oh, it's still my heart. Disney must be the superhero movie is dead. If we have Fantastic Four gross $1 billion and Superman gross $1 billion back to back in July, nobody's gonna be like, what's the answer gonna be for all those people who are like, superhero movies are dead? Are they? Anyway, Adamantium confused me in the story. Did Wolverine already have it built in then? Okay. Spoiler.
Here we go.
Yeah. So Deadpool doesn't take place on Earth. That Wolverine isn't on our Earth. Correct? So technically Adamantium is here. And what I would say to you, Joe, is I would say that once you go to Celestial Island and you start harvesting adamantium, I would say the U.S. government might have a Weapon X program coming into play. It's if you where do you want to go is the question, and if you're telling me that the way they built they answered the question. Well, first off, that was the other thing. There was so much fighting about the end of the Eternals, and we haven't delved that. And you're right. You point out the timeline, right? But the other thing is, the Celestial now means a lot. If it's the key to bringing in, how many Adamantium's X-Men characters are there? 12, 15, 120? Like, if that's the Celestial Island all of a sudden is important. So anyway, I don't know. Okay. Box office is pretty good. It was nice to have box office doing well. 88 million, like I said, for Captain America. Paddington did 13 million. Paddington, the interesting thing about Paddington making a lot of money, 13 million in the US, not a lot for a kids movie, but it's already grossed $100 million, didn't cost a ton to make. So guess what? We're good. And the other big surprise of the weekend, and this is a rare thing that doesn't happen, Rich. And I'm going to bring it up because I love horror films. Hard Eyes, which is centered around, it opened last week and is centered around Valentine's Day, grossed 9.8 million. So technically it grossed more in its second week than it did in its first, which is never happens for horror films. Usually they precipitously fall off a cliff. And so now that movie is at $21 million, again, with a budget of 18 million or 10 million or whatever it is. Dogman continues to impress and do well. It's at 66 million total, running total. We also had opening around the country, Mija 2, which is which is a movie that Americans probably don't know a lot about. But it is a Chinese cartoon that is based in folklore and myth that has already grossed $1.6 billion in China alone. So it's like the fourth highest grossing animated film of all time already. And we're just getting it in the United States. And then, Mufasa finally caught the hedgehog this week as well, which was another interesting, fun story. There's an Adam Ant team. The 80s are back. No, okay. Another story I want to talk about, Rich, because we're starting to get... So it's never too early to start talking about movies that are coming out in 2026. And then we'll talk about the SNL 50th, but we'll start with this. This picture dropped today. This is Matt Damon. Matt Damon. Matt Damon. This is Matt Damon, and Matt Damon is starring in a movie called The Odyssey, which is the next Christopher Nolan movie. The date has officially been announced as July 17th, 2026, which I think is interesting, Rich, because he had that particular weekend is a stranglehold weekend for him. Almost all of his movies are released on that July weekend, and he always clubs things out. Now, I don't know if we're going to have some sort of Barbie Odysseus kind of Oppenheimer thing going on, but I want to talk about this movie.
But keep going.
I think so. A lot of stuff has come out this week. Stuff about this movie that they're shooting and getting ready for later this month. There was a Greek media call where basically they discussed that the movie with the Greek Ministry of Culture is authorizing this film to be filmed in Greek locations, such as Nestor's Cave, Voidakilia Beach, Almiroka, Amalaka Beach, Metheny Castle, and Corcoran. And basically, what's interesting here is that they're literally going to be filming in the places the Odyssey talks about in the poem. And then one of the things that came up was in this Nestor Cave, they have covered everything where they're filming basically what they think is the Polyphemus Cyclops sequence in the Odyssey at this Nestor Cave. And they have a giant 6x6 meter mechanical anthropomorphic puppet that will be built inside the cave and that they're using as a practical effect with no CGI. Which it's mind-boggling that maybe I'm getting a little puppet happy because I watched Saturday Night Live on Saturday where they showed the original Jim Henson Muppet sequence of the original episode of Saturday Night Live, but a 6x6
Gort, baby. I'm King Brobus.
And I just looked at that and it was like 6x6 meter puppet, a giant Cyclops puppet, Rich. So what is Chris Nolan planning for July of 2026, Rich?
We'll see.
His cast is banging too.
To make good with it though, because Supergirl comes out the next weekend, on the 26th.
I would imagine they're going to move forward. That would be my guess.
I raise a serious questioning eyebrow about no CGI whatsoever with this puppet thing. Because I guarantee you, at the very least, there will be digital painting out of puppet wires, things like to raise the hand or whatever. I guarantee you there will be some little
I just think it's
nuances.
They have to do all kinds of stuff with the cave, Rich. They have to do stuff with the cave to make sure they don't damage the cave. The cave is a national park spot for us. You know what I mean? Like, they can't damage the cave. So they're building a 6x6 meter puppet. I don't think people are fathoming right now at their computers a 6 by 6 meter puppet, very big,
I
in a
know.
cave.
I know.
You know
I
what I mean?
just don't think it's going to be entirely practical, and there's not going to be one moment that will, of CG in that whole sequence. I guarantee you they will wind up using it a little
I don't
bit.
know, but it wouldn't that would be Harryhausen in its
Oh, it would be.
breadth
It'd be
and scope.
fantastic.
If they can pull it off, like somewhere Ray Harryhausen will be sitting at, at some sort of like creature design lab in heaven, going, "God damn it! I wish I had thought of that. That
Ray's a
would be
nice guy. I met him
amazing."
once.
Harryhausen, one of the true geniuses. Okay, a couple more comments. That's very ambitious of Nolan. Oh, and this is a good way. We'll have to watch the Odyssey 1997 miniseries
That's
before this comes out.
That's the Armando Sante one, right?
Yeah, it's not bad.
That Hallmark did for ABC, I want to say.
I just think it's weird that all these movies are bubbling around Nolan, and he's like, let's do the Odyssey. Let's go all out. Like, let's just prove I can do any kind of movie. And then somebody wrote, did Laser Cats make the anniversary show? That's a good place to start.
Yes and no.
So
this
SNL's
past week
50th anniversary was
it was the 50th anniversary celebrations for Saturday Night Live. Friday night was a 3-hour live concert from Radio City Music Hall, which was pretty good. It was pretty good. It took for me, it took a little while to get going. I don't think it really kicked in until like the B-52s. There was some good comedy bits. Anna Gasteyer and Will Ferrell bringing back the Culps was great, including the Lamar Kendrick stuff that they dropped in there, which was hilarious. Bill Murray came out and gave us one more Nick the Lounge Singer, which was great. Andy Samberg was joined by Lady Gaga.
And didn't they do a Lonely Island tribute?
A medley of Lonely Island songs, starting off with Dick in a Box. And yes, Laser Cats got a mention in that medley. So Have Cheetah Will Travel. We did get Laser Cats. We didn't get them Sunday night during the 3.5-hour celebration live from Studio 8H.
But I don't know if you know this. You can watch the Laser Cats in its entirety, all the way through, on Peacock. You can watch one after the other. I think there's 7 of them. I just did that this past Friday. So, it was a very long show, Rich. As best it was. I thought it was a little bit unwieldy, like at times. But I also thought
Sunday night show.
Yeah, I thought they did a really good job of blending old and new. Like I thought.
Yeah, I loved mixing of the cast. Of
sketches was really kind of cool.
And also deeper cuts too. If you're going to have Will Ferrell come out and reprise one of his characters, most people would probably name 3 other things before they got to Robert Goulet. But we got Robert Goulet last night, last night.
And then you package Robert Goulet with Kristen Wiig, and you package them on the Lawrence Welk show with Armisen playing Lawrence Welk, and all of a sudden it gets chaotic and crazy. Also, Rich, I told you this in the green room. I would like Eddie Murphy to become a cast member again, just so he can show up every week and have this much energy where he's just blowing people off the screen because he's Eddie fucking Murphy.
Yeah, I think over time Eddie Murphy has had a bit of a back and forth in his relationship with the show. Thank you, Hollywood Minute with what's his face for saying, for his falling star joke way back in the day. So Eddie was kind of pissed off with the show for a while. At the 40th, they could barely get him on stage to introduce a clip package of other Black performers on the show over the years. But here he was in 2 sketches and he looked like he was having a lot of fun. And this is, you know,
And
following
they
his
killed the
Chris Smith,
sketch he killed. He
yeah,
absolutely
from
destroyed
when he
things.
hosted a couple of years ago, and now this. He looks like he was having a lot of fun, and if that's what gets him back onto the show, maybe every 2 years as a guest host or something, I'd be all for it.
Yes, all for it. Yeah, he did a scared straight sketch, and I also immediately came out of that because it was Sudeikis, Kenan Thompson, Eddie Murphy, and Will Ferrell, and 3 of the kids that are on the show now. I came out of that going, I desperately want a Sudeikis, Eddie Murphy, Kenan Thompson, Will Ferrell movie. I don't care what you have to put them in. Let's get them together because Murphy and Ferrell together was like the energy was. It was
insane,
like
yeah.
it was a crazy amount of wattage for a very small set sketch. But he also did the Tracy Morgan thing. He did Tracy Morgan on Black Jeopardy, and holy fuck! Oh my god,
That was beautiful.
he got Tracy Morgan, and then Tracy Morgan was next to him, and my wife walked into the bedroom and just went, "Isn't that Tracy Morgan right next to him?" I'm like, "Yes." So basically, he's doing Tracy Morgan in front of Tracy Morgan, which is such an Eddie Murphy thing to do. Like that's Eddie Murphy is that damn good.
He had the cadence down and Tracy's mannerisms too. It was hilarious. One thing I do want to point out, of course, you know, John Mulaney's there, so we get one of his musicals, which I think was a lot more ambitious than the last 1 or 2 we've seen on the regular show.
It was really ambitious. It was big. It was big.
But there was one
I've never seen Kevin Costner more uncomfortable in my life.
Oh,
and I'm
yeah,
there for it. Ortega didn't look comfortable either, but
no.
Costner looked downright like I'm holding a fucking Elmo head. Like, what the fuck is going on?
I want to point out one thing though. In that big giant musical thing, we had Scarlett Johansson coming out, basically dressed as Audrey from Little Shop of Horrors, to sing a thing, a part. And first of all, she got to sing twice in 2 different sketches last night. That's pretty amazing. She's got a good voice, and
she was really good as Audrey.
And it gave us a taste of what we lost because of COVID. Because back in 2020, she was signed alongside Taron Egerton and Chris Evans to do that new version of Little Shop of Horrors that Greg Berlanti was going to be directing. Taron Egerton was going to play Seymour, and Chris Evans was playing Oren, the dentist.
Yes.
And Billy Porter was going to voice Audrey too. And just seeing a little bit of her doing that there, I think was probably vindication for her. So I'm happy for that. But it
may get the movie back to a green light status.
Tantalizing I don't think that's going to happen. Honestly, I think everybody's on, you know, in much different places now, and getting that project back together like that is going to be ridiculous. But it was a nice tantalizing tease of what we could have had COVID not happened.
We had a lot of guest interactions. We had a lot of Jack Nicholson sighting for the first time in a long time.
Any crowd shot was so much fun to just take a look at who was, there's Ryan Reynolds. He's standing there delivering a line, but you're also looking at all the people around him and everything. It was crazy.
Well, the Ryan Reynolds thing is particularly touchy because it was, Tina Fey and Amy Poehler asking questions. And hi, Ryan Reynolds, how you doing? What have you heard? And he's sitting next to his wife, who's embroiled in one of the biggest scandals. I thought one of the highlights of the night, not necessarily always, for me, a person I don't think has always delivered the most, but I thought Sandler's song was the in memoriam. It was essentially the in memoriam of the night, right? Because it hit all the people that some of the people we missed, like Phil Hartman and Farley and Norm Macdonald. I thought it was really good. It was pretty funny.
I generally don't like Sandler's musical things.
Me neither. But it pulled on my heartstrings.
Absolutely perfect. I really have been liking the 50th more than the 40th anniversary special, to be honest. I think
There was a lot of
here
energy, and
there was
like
a
I
lot
said,
of energy. I think they were much more about acknowledging the show does have its flaws now and then, especially in that one
the Hanks in
one
memoriam,
package of boy, we shouldn't have done this, shouldn't we?
bad decisions,
Bad
several
decision.
sexual
It was
harassment clips, a weird Mike Myers and Macaulay Culkin sketch.
where they're in a tub together.
Yeah,
There's lot of let's just call it unfortunately heavy makeup choices.
yeah. So, but overall, it was good.
Yeah.
I think some of the, like I said, I thought the blending of casts towards the end, there was what is it, the Brooklyn talk or the wife talk or whatever with Amy Poehler and my Brooklyn Bronx Beat, right? Bronx Beat.
Yeah.
And in the middle of it, Myers came out as as his coffee talk lady, and I thought that concept of blending old and new, or just different casts, where their characters now exist in the same universe, is kind of a cool thing. Also, like pairing up to open show Sabrina Carpenter with Paul Simon. And then another thing that really got me, and this is the last thing I think we can talk about before we get to Amadeus, because it's a big movie. We're 38 minutes into the show tonight. What I would say, one of the things that I thought was really good, and I was trying to explain it to people, Miley Cyrus and Ann Howard did a rendition of Nothing Compares to You. And I thought it was a really nice way to acknowledge they did her dirty.
Yes.
That they did Sinead O'Connor.
Sinead O'Connor.
Yes, dirty.
I've written on the site on the anniversary of the Sinead O'Connor ripping a picture of the Pope and launching that controversy because people just didn't understand what she was saying there when she was talking about abuse in the Catholic Church because it wasn't really being talked about at that.
And just so we're clear, that the other thing is vindicated by history.
It's called "We Owe Sinead O'Connor an Apology"
because she's been vindicated by history, Rich. Because
yes,
here's the thing: she ripped the picture, and everybody was upset that she ripped the picture of the Pope, but they weren't listening to what she was saying. And what came out after was everything she was saying by ripping a picture of the Pope about the sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. Kind of spot on.
And it was the picture that hung in her mother's home, and her mom was responsible for basically sending her to a Catholic kind of like, I don't know, workhouse boarding school kind of a situation where she was abused by nuns. She was, physically hit and stuff by nuns. And so much worse went on. I mean, if you really want to know what happened in Ireland in terms of Catholic Church abuse, look up the Madeline laundries. It's fucking frightening.
There's Cillian Murphy just had a movie about it. So
yeah, there was another movie called the Madeline Sisters. I can't remember exactly what it was called. I saw it about 15 years ago at a film festival.
Wasn't it the
that
Magdalene?
Was also really good,
like it was,
really fraught.
Mary Magdalene, like Magdalene Sisters.
Magdalene Sisters. Yeah, excuse me.
But yeah, so I thought that was a very bright moment. It was an interesting rendition of the song. I didn't think Miley Cyrus was great at it, but when Ann Howard came in on the second half of it, I was like, Ann Howard's knows what she's doing with the song. But it was 50. Here's the 50 more of SNL. I
dare say that might be the last time we see Paul Simon perform in public.
Paul
it was a beautiful.
McCartney was great. So, but yeah, I mean, it was a good. It was
how
a good
they
show.
had multiple anchors on Weekend Update.
Can I tell you that was the single funniest segment? Drunk uncle and girl you don't want to talk to, don't want to have a conversation with.
Hooking up.
Hooking up, but drunk uncle with the funny, like, he had me laughing so hard. He's like, he started doing like, I'm not land shark. I'm not land shark. I'm not cheeseburger. Oh, you mean the 70s? And he goes, No, I lost 4 cheeseburger.
Cheeseburgers.
It's a great, like, Drunk Uncle was always one of my favorites. I think he's probably one of my favorite just guests.
And honestly, it's a little bittersweet because I mean, 50 years and we still got some of the original cast around. This might be the last time we see them on the show.
Yeah, Lorraine Newman had a dad segment. Also holding up Gilda Radner's pictures, kind of an important thing.
There were many times that, diehard SNL fan that I am, who I've been doing like the deep dive into the stuff over the last couple of years, really trying to, evaluate it, critique
Garrett
it.
Morris in a chair.
Garrett Morris was great, but during the good nights when Jane and Lorraine held up the picture of Gilda, I just started sobbing on my couch.
Well, and also the bittersweet irony of they showed a Keller a movie, the bittersweet irony of John Belushi in that particular thing being the last surviving SNL member when he was one of the first to tragically go, right? Is the bittersweet irony of that is, in a nutshell, the importance.
Would we remember that Schiller's Reel as a classic, as one of the all-time classic moments of the original cast era, if Belushi had lived and was still alive today? Would we still look at that and go, no, that's a classic? Or is it just, I mean,
the
it's
bittersweet
good.
irony. The bittersweet irony.
It's good. It's an interesting short film and everything. But yeah, man.
I think it's the bittersweet irony of like people we've lost along the way.
That's what helps make it the classic that we regard it as. So,
okay, speaking of classic, we regard it as.
Yeah,
classic. That's a good way to jump. We're in the Oscar decade cavalcade. Tonight's we're doing Amadeus. It's going to be quick. We're going to get through it. Let's start production.
Let's rush through this 3-hour movie.
Let's rush through this 3-hour movie now. By the way, interesting fun fact here: only director's cuts available to watch until February 25th, when you can get a 4K version of the movie sent to you via Amazon on disc, and they're probably going to release it on streaming services. So I just want to say, the director's cut is 20 minutes longer. There is
about 13 minutes
rated R. It's rated R. It's underwhelming. And what I will say to you is, there's a boob shot, and it goes from being a PG movie to an R-rated movie because of one boob shot. And I was sitting there going, okay, this is ridiculous. And then, whatever. But let's talk about production. The key in this production, and I think, I always find something interesting. Key in this production is the sheer volume of people who were auditioning for parts, people who were in versions. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Let me throw down a little bit of contextualization here. Amadeus is based on the film, directed by Milos Forman, is based on a stage play by the guy who wrote Equus. It first was in London, then came over to America on Broadway. I think it was like in 79 or 80.
Peter Schaefer, I think is his name.
At one point, in the original Broadway run, a certain young Mr. Mark Hamill was playing Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. And
playing him well.
I would love to see video of that.
Well, and he replaced, a fun fact here, he replaced Tim Curry. So
yes, also would love to see video of that.
Of that as well. I'd like to see Tim Curry's laugh and Mark Hamill's laugh. I wonder if the laugh he developed for Mozart is similar to the laugh of the Joker. Just asking for a friend.
Salieri.
Hello, Bats. I mean Salieri.
I've seen Mark Hamill on Broadway in another play that was fantastic. He's an amazing stage actor, and I wish more people would give him his props for stuff like that. It's it's Luke Skywalker, Joker.
He got pigeonholed. This is a direct result. Yeah. He does not get the role from Milos Forman because he felt that they wouldn't be able to see him anything other than Luke Skywalker. So
Mhm.
it is a
Well,
direct,
is great too, though.
but it's a terrible thing. Kenneth Branagh was also up for the part. Tim Curry read for it. Meg Tilly was originally cast as Constance, and
Costanza.
Costanza, and she tore her ligament, so she had like a she had a Sofia Coppola moment. Like she had a just where things went awry, where basically she didn't get the role because of it. So we get Elizabeth Berridge, and then
Well,
Simon Callow.
do you know exactly how Milos Forman cast Elizabeth Berridge in this?
If it's
They had
for
already
the
started
boobs, I would say
production
yes.
Wow. They had already started production when Meg Tilly, had her accident and had to bow out. He goes back to LA, auditions a bunch of actresses, comes up with two, Elizabeth Berridge and Diane Franklin from Better Off Dead. And he couldn't make a decision. So he flies both of them out to Prague, where they're shooting this movie, where all the other cast are, and makes them go through, has them there for a couple of weeks while he's trying to decide. He's shooting the movie. He's also like having them do tests with the actors and stuff like that. Finally, he pulls both of those ladies together and said, look, this character is supposed to be the daughter of a woman who, is a landlord. And, she's not from a fancy aristocratic background. So she's probably not as good looking as, so I'm going to pick the less good looking of the two of you. And went with Elizabeth Berridge.
That's horrible. Because she's not that bad looking. That is horrible.
No, she's not.
That is an interesting story where you go.
Honestly, I have a crush on both of them. Elizabeth Berridge in this movie and Diane Franklin in just general.
In anything. Diane Franklin in anything from the 80s. Yep.
Now,
anything. French
do you
bread.
know where Elizabeth? Do you know where Elizabeth Berridge goes on and does one of the great comedic performances of a 90s sitcom that most people don't realize?
What does she do, Rich? Talk to us.
Do you remember the John Larroquette Show?
Yes.
Ran 4 seasons on NBC. Started off really good. Then the network decided to fuddle with the thing and lighten it up. Originally it was a very dark comedy about a guy in an AA program. And very funny, very, very cynical, very dark. I loved it. Remember the two cops who would hang out at the lunch counter?
She was one of the cops.
She was one of those two cops.
I was trying to figure out where I could picture her, like when I was watching her today, and I was trying to figure it out. And now you've helped me, and I appreciate that, Rich. You do that every week. I think that's the interesting thing about this. There's not a lot of fights. There's not a lot of whatever. Production goes it's pretty normal, right? There are sheer volumes of talent on this side of the camera. Twyla Tharp, provides dancers and also choreography on all of the operas.
You have modern dance choreographers of the 20th century.
You have Prague and Kromens, and you have basically they shoot a lot in in foreign countries where it's super easy to it looks old. You know what I mean? Like there's really no problems with any of it. Like where you look at it and you go, usually we have backstage fighting, but again, everything was about the casting, right? Because what you had is all these different versions of the show, Rich, right? Mark Hamill replaced Tim Curry. Simon Callow played Mozart in the original London stage production. He's cast as Emmanuel Shikander, the librettist of the Magic Flute, right? So what you had, the only thing you had going behind was that they were trying to do as much, like they get a little bit shifty with the historical side of things, right? Because in real life, Salieri wasn't shut in.
Oh yeah, this is married. We'll get my feelings about what this is as history versus movie. Also in the cast, she's barely recognizable. I actually kind of had to do a double take because this is the first time I watched this movie realizing it. The maid that Salieri sends to the Mozart household.
Yes.
That's Cynthia Nixon from Sex and the City.
Yes, it is.
And,
yes, it is, my friend.
And
I recognized her immediately, and I'm like, also, just so we're clear, R2D2 is also in the movie. And
Kenny Baker.
Kenny Baker, he plays one of the little people that is on stage in the Commoners Theater, where Mozart takes his son.
And to draw our link to Saturday Night Live, the blonde singer that Salieri was tutoring and kind of lusting after a little bit, that Mozart basically pinches, puts into his show, and then she gets pissed off when she discovers he's engaged. That's Christine Ebersol, who is on the Saturday Night Live season 7.
Yeah, so the cast is good, but that's where all the fights came. What's
unfortunate about Christine Ebersol's role here, though, she has a really good singing voice, yet she's dubbed. Her operatic singing voice here is dubbed.
Well, they did that for everybody.
Yeah,
they did that for everybody.
Yeah,
they dubbed everybody. They did everything in recording studios, basically. That is one of the interesting movies. You had all these talented people on stage.
Use it.
Right. They had talented people on stage playing the roles, but then they also dubbed them over. Again, but there is a lot of talent behind the film. You know what I mean? A lot of talent behind the scenes. And, Twyla Tharp doing the choreography, and then you have, we have basically, giant Philharmonics doing the sound, right? Doing the music and everything. But basically, the kind of thing where they were fighting about not touching notes, but then the guy goes, and one of the controversies behind the movie is that he moves some notes around for some of Salieri's stuff. So it's like a weird decision. Like, he basically said, I won't do the movie unless you don't touch any of Mozart stuff. And then when he gets inside the movie and he's doing Salieri stuff, he moves some things around so Salieri sounds a little bit better.
But then again, Salieri, before this, before the play and then subsequent film here was produced, his stuff was kind of sliding into obscurity, which is something, the character reflects on in the movie itself, where that he begins to see it in his own lifetime, obviously in that first scene. But yeah,
but the production, like I said, the production goes off without a hitch.
Freaking playing his stuff. He should be happy wherever he is.
But no hit, like I said, without a hitch, though. I think that's the main thing, is that there's no hitch. Box office, good place. We go to the numbers. This is not. This movie has a few interesting box office obscurities. First off, domestic box office, 51 million for an Oscar winner is remarkably low. You adjust it for inflation, you're looking at 161. So it's fine but for an Oscar win at the time, 51 is dramatically low, and it only did 50 million worldwide. So we're looking at like 100 million total in its entire run around the world. Here's where it gets interesting, Rich, right? Had 25 opening theaters in the country when it opened. And it opened on September 19th, limited, right? 1984. It eventually gets re-released April 5th, 2002. So some of the money that's accounted for this is a re-release as well. Opens on 25 theaters, plays on 802 theaters max throughout the country. This is 84, Rich. This isn't a significantly small number of theaters that this movie played in. You know what I mean? And looking at it, it's like, I don't know if Warner Brothers didn't want to do The Prince, or it's one of those things where you look at it and you go, what's the deal here, right? And it never gets above a certain amount of money. The budget is only 18 million. So it still grosses 2.9 times its budget, which is good for a modern movie. But here's the really fun part. And these are things you can't even make up. So it is one of 5 movies. Listen to this. It's one of 5 movies that are Best Picture winners that never went into a weekend box office in the top 5 since 1982. So it's one of 5 movies, Rich, that even though it won Best Picture, was not a top 5 earner at the box office, which is wild. The other 5, Rich, The English Patient, The Hurt Locker, The Artist, and Birdman are Best Picture winners that never got higher than 6 at the box office. This movie peaked at 6 during its 8th weekend. And here's the other funny tag. Saul Zaentz, that production company.
Because it didn't get like a huge saturating release.
Yeah, that's part of it. But Saul Zaentz is responsible for 2 of the 5 movies. Amadeus and The English Patient. That is a weird.
And I think it also speaks to the idea that, people say, "Oh, it was a bomb." When you look at it, you have to say box office bomb, because box office is never an indicator of quality. Sometimes they can correlate, but when they don't, it doesn't mean that the film is a bad film. Here, this had some legs to it, so it earned a decent amount of money. But like we said, it never cracked into the top 5. So some people would look at that and go, "Oh, it's a box office failure." I was like, not really.
Well, no, but like I said, part of 5 winners to never.
But we have this beautiful piece of art 40 years later that we still enjoy.
Oh, it's a really great movie. Like let's move on. Box office not important in this case. Critical response then and now. We use Rotten Tomatoes just as a good aggregate. It is sticking at 90% for the critics, which is pretty good. 95 for the audience. So if you like classically done films and you watch it, you end up liking it. Some of the classic reviews, and I think Siskel hit on a real interesting thing that I sort of noticed that I thought was fascinating. Gene Siskel talks about the subject of artistic creation is typically handled badly in movies. Amadeus treats the subject of creativity a fresh way. And I was thinking about that. I hadn't read it, but after I read it, I was like, yeah, because when Mozart is building these requiems and the magic flute and all of the things he's known for, he has these moments, these out-of-body experiences where he's the only one that can hear the music in his head. So we're hearing what he's hearing in his head as everybody else is circling around him. It is really the most creative way to show creativity on screen. The idea that we're in on it with him, right? We're experiencing the magic of how his mind works in this art form, right? And it's absolutely stunning. It is, because it's beautiful.
It's especially in that last sequence where Salieri is taking the dictation on the Requiem.
That sequence,
he goes, "Okay, it's do," and you hear just that line that he's dictating of the trombones and the basses, and then the other instrumentation lines.
The strings match the tenors. You know what I mean? Like, and it plays just those 2 parts.
You get to hear each individual line, and then sadly, 3 minutes later, once we get to the horse-drawn hearse, that's when we hear that all together, all of those pieces acting together to form the full composition. And you can sit there and go, okay, yeah, I see all the individual pieces fit together to form this fuller picture. I feel all the ingredients. It's absolutely brilliant to this stew,
I will say this is an interesting thing. I think this is, one of the things that I came upon watching the movie today. This is one of the true, real villain character pieces to win at the Academy Awards. He is a straight, horrible person. He is he has an arc, right? Salieri has an arc. F. Murray Abraham is fantastic in the role. Like, he's great. Hulce is kind of like a bubbling energy cauldron that kind of just bounces around the movie. And he's also very good, right? And I can understand why they went Salieri versus Hulce, but it is one of those performances that when you talk about Oscar history, Rich, right? It's one of those performances that doesn't occur without the other. You can't have Salieri bubbling to himself and being, throwing a crucifix into a fire, and you can't have it without Hulce being the polar opposite on the other end. It reminded me very much of Philadelphia in that regard. You know what I mean? Like Hanks gets all the glory for Philadelphia, but the Denzel Washington performance is really good. You know what I mean? And you can't have one without the other. And I think, it's lush. It's beautifully photographed. Forman is a great director with biographies. Like but here's what I'm going to say.
Okay.
Stop for a second. I know where you're going, but what I'm going to say is he's a great person with biographies because he tends to focus on creative people, and he doesn't necessarily follow the history, but he follows the creativity of the person. And I think for me I think he gets it with, Man on the Moon. I think he gets it with this, right? Where he makes the, People versus Larry Flint, right? He gets whatever the quirk or the creativity of the person is, he kind of feeds off it. And the movie kind of is like a Pollock painting. It's not historically accurate, but it's a representation of a Pollock. Not at all. And it's a Pollock painting that's splashed against the wall. You know what I mean?
I would say that I would give this the exact same kind of critique that I gave another movie I liked this past year, Saturday Night. Back to Saturday Night Live again. Where I said it's a great movie, it's just lousy history. It's correct history in very broad strokes. Yes, there was a composer named Salieri who was in Vienna at the same time Mozart was, and they were contemporaries. They knew each other. There was not this kind of rivalry. Salieri never pledged his chastity to God in order to become a composer because the man was married with 8 children. So I don't think his chastity was really a big issue.
8 children, a wife, and a mistress.
Yep. Oh yeah, the mistress. I forgot about her. The Requiem was actually I can't remember the name of the nobleman, but we do know who
commissioned it.
Commissioned the Requiem because it was for this nobleman's wife that he was
who passed away tragically.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very much the Liberty Valance rule. When fact becomes history, print the history, or when fact becomes legend, print the legend. You know what I mean? And I think, like I said, I think Forman paints with broad strokes, and he makes movies. The biographies he's done are movies that are all like these larger than life people, and they're like, again, I think it's a Jackson Pollock painting. It's just splashed onto a canvas, and you might get some history, you might not. Like you might get, Magic Flute. It kind of was made this way, maybe. Same with Man on the Moon. Same with People versus Larry Flint. Varying degrees of reality. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't despise.
Well, there's a difference. There's a difference. I think in biopics that condense certain things for dramatical reasons, and also because you can't, do the Andy Kaufman biopic and have it be 9 hours long, and make sure everything is absolutely correct, according to history. This, I think, kind of just takes, the idea about the genius of Mozart and kind of butts him up against Salieri. Salieri being a just a stand-in for conventional society of the time. He's not. I mean, he is a character, yes, and he's a well-defined character. F. Murray Abraham does a wonderful job playing him, and his descent into jealousy and madness. Which I did think about this too. Our 3 Academy Award films so far have all been have characters who descend into madness at some point, and manage to pull themselves out of it though. which I think is interesting. But
I don't know if he pulls himself out of it. He's still in a mental institution at the end where he's trying to kill himself.
I mean, he came to recognize the genius of Mozart in the moments of that transcription scene, and I think he actually came to genuinely appreciate what Mozart was as a genius composer, but he was still mad at God.
And the only other problem with that is
he's laying waste. A separate issue.
But he's laying waste to a priest. So I don't know if he's come back from the brink. He's laying waste to a priest in a way that you don't really see in American films. He's absolutely the priest looks like he was in The Exorcist at the end. Like priest goes in, he's bubbly, he's energetic.
Actor Richard Frank.
And he comes out, and like when he comes out of the back end of the movie, Rich, it's like he's been chewed up and spit out by like a demon. Like it's like he faced Reagan, like not the president, the Exorcist Reagan. I think the performances are great. I think it's one of those rare things where
I want to take a second to acknowledge the performance of that priest. Richard Frank is the name of the actor.
Good. He's fantastic.
He's got like 5 lines, 6 lines, and he does a lot of listening and reacting. And he's so good. And I think it really
is good.
Very nice small performance. I wish he'd had a bigger career. He just looking at his filmography, he did a lot of TV, did some Remington Steele, who's on an episode of Max Headroom, Matlock, Mad About You. Falcon.
So he bounced around NBC. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Everything in the movie is a good performance. There are a bunch of really good performances. Everybody's really solid. It's lush, as you would expect a period movie to be. It's probably, I would argue, probably could be like a gold standard for period movies. Like as you get period movies throughout the rest of from the 80s on, they're judged against this movie, right? Like this and maybe Dangerous Liaisons are the two where they're so lush and so well made that you go, okay, that, it has to be up to that standard. I think, Ebert had a really interesting thing as well, since we're talking about critical stuff. He was much easier on the film than a lot of critics. And again, 90%, it's very hard to find angry critics. But he had some things to say. But the one that Todd McCarthy of Variety was brutal. Great material and themes to work with such top talent involved. The stature and power of the work possessed on stage have been noticeably diminished in the film adaptation. And he goes on to talk about the film's historical inaccuracies and just that it kind of just it wilted away from him. I
mean, as long as we recognize that that is history, this film is complete and utter twaddle. It's fine. I can
doesn't make it any less entertaining. And that's the thing. Like one of the things we're talking about with the 3 movies we picked thus far is we're looking at and again, whatever you're looking for our through line. One of the through lines that we're discovering is, for me anyway, is that we're looking at the lens of history through certain people telling a story, and some of the narrators we've chosen in this particular path or the Oscars Decade Cavalcade this year are not as reliable as others. So
very good point.
You know what I mean? So I think it's an interesting through line that it's one of our discovered through lines. Like every time we pick Oscar Decade Cavalcade movies, you and I we have a list, we go over the list, we try to figure out what works, what's a good through line. And we had a certain through line because we thought a certain movie was going to be winning Best Picture this year. That's apparently not going to be winning Best Picture because Nora's winning everything. So we were going with this specific through line, and then all of a sudden you start finding things. You pair up Lawrence of Arabia and Amadeus, and all of a sudden you have brittle people with huge egos that are narcissistic, that happen to get trapped in whatever they're doing, having breakdowns and crisis of conscience and morals, and then you jump up and you have people Bridge on the River Kwai, you have, fucking Alec Guinness, who kind of like goes through a fucking wormhole and just can't believe he's done what he's done. You know what I mean? And so it's an interesting through line where we have unreliable narrators who don't understand exactly how bad it is of what they're doing. Because Salieri in this movie is vicious. Like, F. Murray Abraham plays him as, the way the character is played on screen is he's a God-fearing person who eventually gets to the point where he hates God. There's a whole through line for his character where God has forsaken him for this quack of a loon of a talent.
Well,
that's super interesting.
The moment we see Salieri as a young boy going, I love music so much. God, if you give me a sign, I will pledge my life to music and glorifying your name. And then his dad keels over from,
his dad chokes to death. His dad eats an egg and chokes to death. It's brutal. And then he's like, he tells the priest.
Stepped on my joke.
What was I'm sorry.
My joke was his dad died of the Heimlich maneuver not being invented yet.
I didn't mean to step on your joke. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I think the funny thing here is it's not.
I'm in the middle of something here. And in that moment,
you're rolling.
Salieri goes, "Oh, God loves me. God's anointed me. That makes me super fucking special." And all of a sudden, bam, the world revolves around Salieri in his mind because God chose him. And that leads to when he, years later, when he sees somebody who has an innate ability far beyond his own,
far behind his
coming from this commoner, disgusting vulgarian that he doesn't, he's just absolutely repelled by. He thinks, oh,
I'm vulgar. My music is
this gift to this clod. He's disgusted, and that's the whole thing that drives him.
I want to go back to the dad death. Really, I didn't mean to step in your joke. I want to go back to the dad death. The dad death occurs after he tells the story. He's talking to the priest and he's telling the story. His dad death occurs. They go to an immediate cut to the priest, and the priest has a look on his face like, dude, God didn't kill your father. Like, the priest is like,
he's so emotionally arrested in that moment, thinking God granted him.
Never in a movie, Rich, has a priest looked so in over his head. Never in a movie has a priest conveyed to me, I'm in so much trouble here because this person thinks God killed his dad so he could make music. And it's a fantastic.
Jason Miller in The Exorcist.
Oh, yes, but that's only because he was drinking before he went in to meet the devil. It is what it is. But yeah, like, I think the again, with a movie that hits 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, the bad critics are also super interesting. David Denby, New York Magazine. It's pitifully trashy. And the last third of the movie is a disaster. And I was thinking about it. I was watching the movie and I read this one quote that the last third of the movie is a disaster. The last third has the scene you were talking about earlier is probably the most dynamic scene in the movie, generally speaking, right? It's Amadeus on his deathbed trying to make money for his wife and his kid who have left him, and Salieri's there and they're transcribing the Requiem that he's working on, and it's great, like, because he's going so fast. Salieri's like, slow down, and it's a creative process that's really interesting. It's so to say the last third of the movie is a disaster, I think is a bit much. There's no real portion of the movie that is a disaster. I will say another interesting thing that came about today in doing research for today, the director's cut is the only thing available until February 25th. Okay.
Yeah.
Then you can get the theatrical cut that's 20 minutes shorter and also PG instead of R-rated. But what I found fascinating is that that I do agree that the sequence that occurs with Mozart's wife and Salieri, where he basically says, bring me all the stuff and then you come tonight, because he's going to act like he's going to take advantage of her and she wants to see how far she'll go. but he doesn't actually. And what happens is she undresses, and it's provocative in a terribly creepy way because it's. And then he rings the bell, and he has somebody escort her out, right? And she throws up a candelabra. I'm surprised it doesn't burn the place down. But then I was thinking about it in the original version of the movie. That scene doesn't exist. So later on, when she comes home at the end of the Requiem sequence, and Mozart has passed away, and she throws Salieri out of the apartment and says, I don't have somebody to escort you out. It didn't make any sense in the original version, right?
I mean, yes, it's a callback to that scene that was cut, but I think it still works. With that scene,
it does work because we're poor and penniless, and you've put us here.
She's highlighting the class difference between the two of them,
right? But I will say, in the much maligned director's cut, the sequence where she almost fully disrobes, and is embarrassed, and he has his schlub of a butler escort her out, is like, it does at least give credence. And I want to say that the director's cut is much maligned, right? It's a director's cut that came out in 2002 when director's cuts were the rage because Ridley Scott had made 7 Blade Runners, and I own all of them. Just so we're clear, I'm not judging. I'm just saying I own all 7 Blade Runners.
Same here.
And so I have. Do you have the case? Do you have the collector's case? Oh, I have the collector's case too. Oh, beautiful. One of my favorite.
Right over there on the shelf.
Yeah, it's right over there for me. Anyway, but yeah, I think it's interesting. So legacy. So every once in a while, this digs back up on stage, right? So there's a new generation of people doing it with new productions all over the world. They did have a couple of recent Metropolitan Opera revivals of some of his work. But I also think the legacy thing that jumped out for me is you don't think a lot about Milos Forman making biopics until you start. Then you realize Milos Forman has made a lot of biopics. You know what I mean? Like, all of a sudden he's Valma, Amadeus, People vs. Larry Flint, Man on the Moon, and then Goya's Ghosts, was one of the last things he did. Theoretically Ragtime also. And he also made movies that have musical implements to them or musical things to them, right? Or employed musicians in, like, People vs. Larry Flint has Courtney Love, right? He has a music thing going on that I think he's fascinated with music and whatever. And I think that's part of the legacy of this movie is that it leads to more of his stuff where he's blending it where he's like, and I think again, my take on it is he does like a Pollock version of biographies. He doesn't necessarily historically accurate stuff, but he does things where he takes whatever the artist
the stories of creativity and of mavericks, because Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, creative maverick. Andy Kaufman, very much a creative maverick. Again, Saturday Night Live connection. Larry Flint was definitely a maverick. How creative you want to say he was, that's up for debate. But I think they all fit a common interest, or at least a common thread through a lot of Milos Forman's work. Remember, he also directed the film version of Hair. Very much a groundbreaking musical and
thought to be unfilmable. Story. Stage production that thought to be unfilmable, right? A stage production that was thought to be unfilmable found a way to do it. This was also thought to be unfilmable because of a great stage production. Accolades, it gets Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, where both were nominated. Both Tom Hulce and F. Murray Abraham were nominated. Best Screenplay, best art direction, obviously. It loses cinematography. It loses editing and cinematography to The Killing Fields.
I think, I mean, Killing Fields is a fine film. Don't get me wrong. But I think it's funny that this movie loses the Academy Award for editing when we have a director's cut that's 20 minutes longer and is not as good a movie. I think it very much shows how good the editing for the theatrical release was.
Well, it's nominated. It's nominated for 10. It wins 7, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nominated for 10, wins 7, and was definitely not going to win all 10 because Hulce and F. Murray Abraham were against each other. So it's also one of the rare cases where we have a Best Actor nomination from the same movie for 2 people. That doesn't happen often, right? It rarely happens because eventually what happens in modern day Hollywood is both actors that are up for either one goes, I'll go supporting, right? And because they try to win either side, even though and so, but this is one of the rare cases where both actors were up for Best Actor. I think, another legacy is it's voted, accolades wise, it's one of the 100 best movies of all time, according to the American Film Institute, right? It's the director's cut is an interesting beast also, where you kind of if you don't know, I was looking around for it trying to find it, and then I read up on it, and you can't find the original because Saul Zaentz was working on a theatrical cut 4K, and I was like, and then I looked on Amazon, and I was like, we can have it to you by February 25th, the day it comes out. And I was like, holy shit. So we're actually very timely. But I also think the legacy here is F. Murray Abraham gets roles because of this movie. And he eventually, F. Murray Abraham also gets a little bit typecast because of this movie, right?
Mm.
He plays a lot more morally gray characters, right? He plays a lot more, whatever he was playing before, he kind of plays darker characters. Because this character is pitch black. I was watching today, forgetting how pitch black this character is, Rich. You know what I mean? He is just.
I dare say, we're going back to the whole, director's cut thing here. Take out that whole second sequence of Salieri and Costanza in the evening when she comes back and basically, okay, I'll fuck you if it gets my husband the job. And he's this close to going for it, and then he remembers no, and I'm not sure why he's going, yes, I have my vow of chastity to God, who I'm also already mad at, and who I've already burned the crucifix of. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So if you took that out, I think it would
make some
keep
nicer.
His character complex, but I don't think it would. I think it would add to the complexity of his character a little bit more, because here this is just almost a virtual outright horrible. And here, I mean, but without it, I think we see him struggling more with his faith and everything else. And I kind of think that's the meatier and more interesting choice to keep him.
I'm actually going to take it darker. I'm going to take it darker on you. I took it as he wasn't sure she was going to show up, and when she did, I don't think he thinks it's a big deal to say no to her. But the secondary act of she goes out of her way to procure this job for her husband, and she takes off half of her clothing, most of her clothing, and then he goes, no. I almost view it as worse, right? Because she's already told you I'm willing to do this, right? And you've already seen some goods. And the way he does, you think it's I guess it could be that he catches his chastity. But I also viewed it as I just want to see how far she would go, which takes the character down a much darker path.
That's true too.
You know what I mean? Is she willing to do this?
Or he may have said, I don't care about my vows to God anymore, and then just had this brief moment of, oh, wait, I've been chased all my life. I don't even
This
know
is
what
not
to
who I
do in
am.
this situation. And rather
Right,
than
and
appear to be some kind of weak man,
and
who
it's
is
also
sexually inexperienced, he throws her out to avoid that
well, and
whole.
it's also coupled with the fact that Mozart has clearly diddled the actress that he had a crush on.
Yes.
And that's an added sequence as well, right? That's another added piece to the 20-minute director's cut, is an extended sequence in a dressing room is part of the
Yeah.
director's cut as well.
Yeah. I
So
mean, you get a little bit of
definitely
that
makes it darker.
when they're on stage and the emperor's there, and then Costanza and her mother show up. You get that. I don't think you need that whole second bit back in the dressing room, as much as I enjoy Christine Ebersol's, small performance here.
Oh,
But
she has a great like, it's your wife, is it? Like it's she's brutal. And then
yeah.
they have a great moment where F. Murray Abraham kind of goes to the old F. Murray Salieri, and he's like, I knew at that moment, preacher, pastor, that he had her. And it's like, I think when you couple that with the boob sequence with Costanza, you know what I mean? Costanza.
Yeah.
I think when you couple it, I think it's definitely a much darker Salieri than is in the theatrical cut. And I also think, like, and I know this sounds weird, but in the director's cut, at least, not that you don't understand that there's class inequality, but it gives her a little bit of that edge. I don't have a servant to show you out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, bitch, I was half naked when
Yeah.
you showed me out with your fucking doorman. You know what I mean? And so I don't know. I'm not on board with the director's cut. It's one of those rare movies where it's like, I feel it was a director's cut for director's cut's sake. Doesn't happen with everything.
Yeah,
Doesn't happen with everything.
I'd say probably about 2% of the director's cuts out there are the lesser of the versions of that movie. And this is one of them. And studying those differences, I think, offers some great insights into the art of editing. So that's why I'm always
the art of editing, and also
see, multiple versions of a movie.
Part of it is the story behind it, right? When we do the production stuff, right? Was there a lot of turmoil on the set? Like, a director's cut for a movie where somebody went in and chopped the movie to pieces on a studio level is different than, like, Blade Runner, right? The different versions of Blade Runner all have different, bosses and people kind of fucking up the works, right? Or not, like, well, we don't understand this movie, so we need a voiceover, and Harrison Ford does the voiceover as grumpy Harrison Ford, and back to Brave New World, and grumpy Harrison Ford does the voiceover as grumpy Harrison Ford, and they mistake it for, oh, Harrison Ford's doing film noir, this is cool, and they don't know what the fuck they're talking about, is different from Saul Zanet's going, everybody's got a director's cut, we had 20 minutes we cut out of this movie, let's put the 20 minutes back and re-release it. Different.
Money.
Well, and that's what I got out of all the talk about the director's cut today. I read and was looking into all the information. It wasn't that Milos Forman was pushing for a director's cut. It was Saul Zanet's, the production company, coming in and going, hey, we have 20 minutes on the cutting room floor and everybody's releasing director's cuts of classic movies from the 80s. Let's get it out there and see if we can make a little bit of scratch, and also, we can give
director's
you
cut should actually mean producer's cut.
Yes. Well, and that's the other thing. When I read about the 4K, it's Saul Zanet's son who has pushed the 4K theatrical cut, because the theatrical cut hasn't been anywhere. It's been in limbo since 2002, which is crazy. Like, also, the other thing with director's cuts that's weird, it is very weird for a director's cut to take the place of a theatrical cut. Forthright. Like, it's very weird. You know what I mean? There's 7 versions of Close Encounters. But you're always able to at least get the original theatrical cut.
3.
I'm using hyperbole, Rich.
I was-
You're standing on my joke, Rich. No, I'm just kidding. But like I said, like, you know, the versions of things that are done for artistic sake versus, you know, like Lucas's wacky, wonky director, producer cut, whatever the fuck is happening there, is different in this case. And I think while the theatrical cut is probably a better movie, it's also like, I think there are reasons for the director's cut that make at least one scene in the movie better for me. So I was like, okay, you know what I mean? Trying to figure it out. And then you realize you can't get it. And then that's a different animal. Like, if you can't get a theatrical cut of something, I think that's stepping on toes. That's weird for me. You know what I mean? Like, Lucas fighting about theatrical cuts. We're not allowed to see them or have them anymore. And then you have people out there actively fighting to bring them into the light. I still can't believe we don't have them. Disney is a monster. I can't believe we don't have them.
Yeah, and I will argue all day and all night, twice on Sundays, that, you know, the original theatricals of the Star Wars trilogy should be available, if nothing more than for historical purposes, because, you know, they are documents of the not just special effects industry, you know, at 3 very distinct points, only separated by a couple of years, that chart how rapidly that technology grew, but also just as films that impacted, the popular zeitgeist in such an unprecedented and really unduplicated way. And to have that in any kind of adulterated form doesn't really allow for the full study of those films and that impact.
Sean Smithson, right? I'm late, but hello, brothers. The movie's great. I have it on Laserdisc, so you might have a theatrical cut. If you have it on Laserdisc,
yeah, you have the theatrical cut. Then
you have the theatrical cut. Congratulations. Not available, Sean, if you're paying attention. But okay. So a couple things. If you like our show, if you like what I was talking about Amadeus and SNL and Brave New World and the Odyssey movie that's coming out in 2026, because we're a little bit early. Like us on Instagram, like us on YouTube, like us on Facebook. Rich, where can people find you and your stuff?
Well,
especially SNL stuff.
All of my written work is at filmbuffonline.com. Right now, we are, of course, in the midst of our SNL at 50 series of feature pieces about the long and storied history of that great comedy institution and how it went from being the bad boys to being an institution. We also have a Facebook page that lets you know every time we post new stories, as well as some Facebook exclusive content. I have 2 other podcasts that I work on. One is the Big Picture Podcast with my very best friend and co-host, Natasha Bogutsky. She just got back from Rome 24 hours ago. So we'll probably have something new, I'm hoping, before the Oscars in 2 weeks. But if not, well, we will definitely have a new episode the morning after the Oscars, because we always record
coming
something.
March 11th here.
Yes.
We have she will have a residency with us for a couple weeks as we delve into her film mind for a couple weeks and give us
the other podcast I am on is the Film Scribes, the official podcast of the Philadelphia Film Critics Circle. I'm trying to I produce it. I'm trying to round everybody up for a recording sometime this week that we should hopefully have out for next week. I'll pimp that again on next episode here. Also, I can be found on socials at Filmbuff Rich on Twitter and Blue Sky. And this Saturday, I will be in Wellsboro, Pennsylvania for the Wellsboro Film Festival with our wonderful short film, This Way to the Egress. We'll be participating in the comedy block. So if you're anywhere in northern central Pennsylvania, come on out, see a movie, see a bunch of short films for just $10. That starts at 4:45 in the afternoon.
Awesome. You can find me, JW the Movie Guy, on Facebook. Instagram, Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky. Did I say Twitter? I said Twitter. Anyway, whatever it is. You can also find me on Tuesday nights. That's fine. That's all that matters at this point, kids. You can also find me on Tuesday nights with my good friends Jerry and Kyle. We'll be talking more Captain America tomorrow night, of course, and a couple other things, some TV shows that are hitting big right now. We have a Spider-Man show to talk about and stuff. You can find us every week. Now, we will be here next week, I should say, for our last week of the Oscar Decade Cavalcade. And this one's kind of a big one. It's kind of an important one. Ties into what we're doing. And I'm super excited that we're going to be doing it on the show. Everyone knows I'm a huge Spielberg guy. So we are doing Schindler's List. Ties in with what we wanted to do. It's from the 90s, it's one of the great films of the 90s. Also, one of the actual greatest film back-to-backs in the history of film for Spielberg, right? You do Jurassic Park, and then you do Schindler's List in the same calendar year and release them both on top of each other, fixing one while the other one's finished. Schindler's List next week, one of the great Spielberg films of all time, one of the greatest movies ever made as well, and we'll end our Oscar Decade Cavalcade. Then we're off on March 4th, but then Natasha Bogutsky returns on March 11th, and we will have that movie next week to let everybody get an idea of what we're doing. Just rewatched Schindler's List a week ago. Excellent film. Yes, it is an excellent film. We're glad you rewatched it. We prepare for next week. Homework already. Yeah, you've already done the homework, and you can find it's on Peacock in their Oscar block. So it's definitely out there. And again, it's always a tough rewatch, but it is indelibly worth it. And also, in this particular case, our through line will be practically perfect, and we hit 4 different decades in this year's Oscar Decade Cavalcade. We cut it down extensively a great bit, but we felt that we had a through line with 4 movies we've always wanted to do. So thank you for joining us tonight. We'll see everybody next week. Movies opening this week. We just have Osgood Perkins, I should say, with The Monkey. We'll talk and we'll see everybody next Monday for Schindler's List. Thank you for joining us. Have a great night.